Whatever you do, don't be late to enter fantasy esports tournaments and esports pools. Their prices are to die for, and that's no joke. Even if you've had a few beverages too many, you'll still be able to see that they're a legit company who offer top competitions and live, still alive, not dead yet, still live in-play betting. Competition's not just dead because you made a joke or because the match has begun. You can still make bets during the games, actually, on specific topics. Now, IMT, Immortals, made it to the final of Dreamhack Montreal, where they were going to face North, obviously a team pretty hot off a second place at Dreamhack Malmo, Dreamhack Masters Malmo, and Immortals themselves, a while ago, coming off a second place at the Major. And obviously these two teams met in the round of 8, actually, at Dreamhack Malmo, where it wasn't that convincing a match, actually. So, with this final coming up, some of the players from Immortals didn't arrive on time to start the match, so the first map ended up being forfeited by them. They then played what would be the second map. They lost it, not that convincingly. Well, it was fairly convincing of North, but not convincing of Immortals' side, and thus the series was over, the final was over, North were the champions, and it felt like no final had really happened. Now, details as to how this all went down are pretty thin on the ground, mainly due to how contradictory a lot of the statements have been from the different parties involved, and even some of the statements from people who are on the same side don't match up. So here's what seems pretty clear. Steel and Bolts, current in-game leader Bolts, former in-game leader Steel, they did apparently make it there. They were sat there, they were waiting for the others. By the way, former Luminosity, keyed players from Fallen's teams, unlike the others. The other three, kNg, Lucas One, Henny, they didn't turn up. I don't know why I'm calling Lucas One, if I'm calling the other one Henny, but Lucas E, Henny, they didn't turn up or were late and didn't get time. And which, when we say late, we mean weren't there in time to set up all their equipment, do the warm-up, and then begin the game. Now, rumors swirled around this situation that it's because the three of them that weren't there were out partying, out drinking too much, just didn't go to bed early enough, and somehow that played a part in them not being around to compete in the first map of the final. The reason why rumors like that swirled around is, first of all, some people at the event made comments along those lines. Secondly, they have had, some of them, a history of such behavior. Public, are you ready, and private. Just because you guys don't know about it doesn't mean people in the industry have never heard about these things happening or seen it with their own eyes. Now, one such rumor, which certainly has a basis to it, was that at the Major, at least one of the Immortals players was out partying, drinking, too late the night before the final of the Major. So a team that's never made it to the Major, one of the players in this, gets to the Major, makes it to the final of the Major, the World Championship of Counter-Strike. Only happens twice a year, and he's out drinking, partying, doesn't get like a clean night's rest and go to sleep and get lots of... And then comes to the final, they lose the final. Speaks for itself, right, if you heard that that's happened. So if you hear that that happened, and someone else says something similar, and then you see circumstances that look like they present themselves as being the results of such behavior, not unsurprising, that would again become a topic, and that if people think that's happened, they're going to make a lot of that aspect, even though actually missing the finals, the bigger issue. Now, first and foremost, this is unprofessional behavior, especially due to what happened. That's the key point I want to make. The fact that you ruined the final and you did shit in the final anyway. Now, I am actually not personally or professionally against the concept of drinking and going out and partying or staying up however late you want. Like personally, when I'm at a lot of events, I kind of have insomnia. I actually try, what sad thing is I fucking try going to bed and I just lie there for like 3 hours. So it's not like I think everyone can just go and it's all the same time zones and we can all just go to bed at midnight and then wake up at 8 and have a perfect 8 hours sleep. No. But I'm also not against drinking, etc., because I'm in favour of personal liberty. People being able to choose what they do with their lives, as long as it doesn't impact others, which is the key point I want to make here. So a famous example, some of you will have heard of before, and I'm going to use it now. The great, truly great CSGO player from France, Shox, in-game leader currently of G2, formerly of Titan, Very Games, LDLC, Envious. When he was in Envious, he was in a period in his career where maybe motivation wasn't at its peak. There were a lot of problems within the team. He himself wasn't playing a role that he particularly wanted to play and he was essentially wasn't so suited for. And he famously would go out and would drink too late and would stay up too late and would come in for the early game. That's why the meme started the Envious early game. And he wouldn't be prepared and he would be tired and he probably wouldn't be in his best form. And some of the envious players also engaged in this lifestyle along with him, but he certainly, for me, was the leader of such behavior. But you know what? First of all, he's so good, he could still sometimes be really fucking good in those games and for the rest of the day and win those tournaments and place very highly. Secondly, he never ruined the tournament. He never turned up and then the game just couldn't start and then games were delayed for hours. And he never just turned up, did that and then attacked other people on Twitter or publicly and attacked the tournament and said it was their fault that the game was so early in the morning. No, he turned up, and if he was worse for wear, he suffered the consequences for that. And what are the consequences? Well, in terms of me, I might joke about him. I might make the envious early game meme, and we might all reference that, which, you know what? Yeah, suggests he's unprofessional. Secondly, there's the fact that, again, if it's someone like me, I might then have to lament that this guy, actually, as great as he was, might have been even greater, and sort of think back on what wasted potential he had at certain times in his career. These are the consequences if you don't harm others with your actions. The main issue here is not the going out and drinking, although that, if you're an Immortals person thinking from the position of Immortals, yes, that's an issue. That's indicative of some sort of a mentality. But for us as outsiders, the issue is not that these players stayed up late either drinking or just stayed up late and didn't turn up on time or just didn't set their arms or didn't wake up. Whatever it might be, the issue here, primarily, before we get into all the drama, is that they fucked up the final. And then we had the ensuing shit show. So first of all, they ruined the final completely. That is the biggest issue of all. We had a final in CSGO that was one map in a match where it could have been 3. Fans paid to see this match. People tuned in online to watch this match. And they need those viewers, if you're Dreamhack, to tune in online to represent the numbers that they're going to sell to their sponsors for next year to get sponsorship for the Dreamhack Open Tour. Dreamhack was competing with that final with the final of ESG Mykonos, where Team Liquid, a very popular NA team, is playing against Mouse Sports, who has a bunch of Eastern European fan support, and now you're competing with already like a borderline similar kind of match, and no one's watching the first match. In fact, people are like, where the fuck is the first match? Then the second map is just a blowout, and it's just worthless. Not a complete blowout, but wasn't very competitive. Now you're fucking with Dreamhack's business and ruining esports. This is also unprofessional in the sense of their job. Turning up on time is the first requirement of a pro player, as far as I'm concerned, even beyond practicing. You could practice nothing at all, or as long as you turn up to the matches, you've done the first requirement. They also, these players in question, deflected blame for pretty much everything that happened and didn't even seem to accept their own punishment. Like, they were arguing against it and trying to claim like maybe it was unfair, which, by the way, we've heard from some Brazilian players in the past where they make everything about like, oh, it's all just racism against me, by the way, from like E-League, etc. And it's all just because we're Brazilian. They never accept punishment, that they were the ones in question who did something, and this is the consequence. They were some of them tried to claim, oh, but we were there 20 minutes before the game starts. Yeah. I have heard that the rule is, remember, this is an opinion video, I'm not claiming this is news reporting. I've heard that the rule is you have to be there 90 minutes before, so you have time to set up properly. Dreamhack, remember, 20 minutes before the map starts is when they fucking do all the analysis, etc. You can start the show, you know everyone's in position, you've got all the logistics as far as if you're Dreamhack squared away, then you can start your show, get everything running, and you know roughly what time things will start. 20 minutes before is not good enough. That would be like the guy who says, but I was at the gate 5 minutes before the plane took off. What, you can't just let me on? That takes 1 minute. No, because I have to do all my checks. Everyone's there. I have to check everyone's passport. I have to make sure everyone's bag is on the fucking plane, because remember, they don't put your bag on if you don't get on the plane. I have to make sure all the legal stuff's there. I have to sign some documents. I have to close the doors. The captain has to get everything ready. You have to check everyone's ready. You can't just come along 5 minutes before that. You were late. You don't think you were because the plane hadn't left, but you were late. So, Immortals players, you were late. I don't care if you were there 20 minutes before. You were late. Learn what it means to be late in the context of these tournaments, and definitely don't deflect the blame onto someone else because you think suddenly you should be allowed to come 20 minutes before. 90 minutes before is apparently the rule, and you are to adhere to that as everyone else is. Now, in terms of the drinking stuff, yes, drinking, staying up too late, that does to some degree show a lack of dedication, discipline. There's actually a great saying that this scenario reminds me of. And it's a saying, it's about a cycle of time, okay? And there's a more extended one where it's like there's 3 different stages. But if you shorten out the middle stage and just make it the last of the first stage, the cycle still works. And it essentially goes like this. Hard men create good times because they're hardened, things are tough, they battle, they want to create something better for their children. They want their children to have an easier life. They create good times, and then good times create weak men. And what happens is, the good times mean that people come along who don't, life's not hard. They're not forced to be great. They're not forced to do things in an efficient manner, an effective manner. Society becomes very inefficient. There's lots of loose ethics around. Things generally degenerate, which then creates hard times, which then creates hard men, which then creates good times. And it's a cycle that goes around like that. Now, was it Tennyson? So was it that guy who made that? I can't remember. Now, in this sense, I think this happened in the Brazilian scene. Luminosity players came along and there was no top Brazilian scene. There was no place for them in the international scene. They battled and they fought and they trained and they were hard men who paved the way and were incredibly inspirational and did something special and carved out a space for themselves in North America and became one of the greatest teams of all time. They outworked, they outperformed, they outclassed, at least in the server, the North American players who were of their era, who had more money and better backgrounds and easier lives. This new crowd, the Immortals gang we've got now, they are much more like the NA players that Luminosity beat out. They got to kind of ride on the coattails of Luminosity, where people are like, wow, if Luminosity's this good, and they've got a couple of players and we've never really heard of from Brazil, I guess there must be more talent in Brazil. Let's get this second best Brazilian team. And then people were even like, hey, let's get the third best Brazilian team. Hey, let's get a player from Brazil. People started to think that they got to ride a little bit on that. Now, yes, they had some talent and they did some things their own when they got the opportunity, but they weren't hard men in the same way. They never had to be as good as Luminosity and the SK teams. They'd never made a major until this last one. They fell 3 times in a row. They'd never won a significant title. I mean, CVO Pro was all right because Virtus Pro was there, but first of all, they were in their first slump and it wasn't significant. It wasn't a tier 1 event. And that's despite the fact this Immortals crew and the last 2 lineups they have more talent and skill in their lineups than Kaboom, the first Keyed Stars lineups. That was like further star player, Fallen the Genius, and then a bunch of middling players, including Steel, Bolts, who now aren't even in that team and were worse back then than they are now. Yet they haven't accomplished as much with this team. You know why? They don't have a Fallen or a Zeus to help guide them. Now, back in the day, BSL was even involved with this. He went over to Brazil. He kind of helped them learn a bit of how you play European Counter-Strike, had to teach them what leadership's about, not just playing individually. I'll link it I'll put in the description box below, which is in Portuguese Brazilian, by the way. If you want to read that and you're from Brazil and know something about the history of your scene. But Fallen is a great man in terms of what he's done for his team and how he's taught them to play. SK plays Fallen Counter-Strike. I've always said this. Immortals plays Brazilian Counter-Strike. I've seen a lot of Brazilian teams over the years. They play this free-flowing style. They play off a lot of individual skill. You AWP whenever you want to. You're very skilled, but that's your crutch. That's all you play off. Fallen plays extremely smart Counter-Strike. He plays the way that the tactical teams did in Europe historically in Counter-Strike. He doesn't play like NA, doesn't play like Brazil. He's forged his own style of how to play the game. And I have a lot of respect for him. And you notice the players who are in his teams, he makes them conform to the system, makes them buy into the system. He makes them want to be professionals and want to go to the top. And if they don't, guess what? He finds a way to get them out of the team and to get the right people in the team, and he recruits the right people. Likewise, Zeus. I know a lot of people won't know this because he's not someone who's done that much video work actually. But Zeus is a really inspirational guy. He's got a fantastic personality. Thanks to having been in NA enough now. First of all, he always had some of the best English in the team. But he actually understands a bit of the NA culture. I think he's like the best bridge for me between the Brazilian culture and the NA culture. Like if there's ever an issue in the Brazilian scene, Zeus is the sort of guy I want to go to and go like, listen, I'll pretend I don't know anything about this situation. Like, explain to me, why is this Brazilian player reacting in this way? Like, what's the background? Why are they so angry about something here? Why do they just blame someone in this? He's one of the few guys who can kind of explain it because he's lived in both worlds. He gets it. He knows there's a difference as well. You need guys like that to be able to teach these younger guys. Like, listen, we're not in Brazil anymore. Let's act in a different way. And you know what? We want to be champions. Like, fuck just being good and settling for that. Let's be the best. Let's be better than we are. You need people like that. And unfortunately, Immortals don't have one, and they haven't had since Zeus left them in, I think it was like November of 2015. They also don't have star talents who have extremely driven, dedicated personalities. So the star talents in Immortals are kNg and Henny. Now, you look at the star talents in a team like SK, they have Fur, a guy who wants to win more than anything. They have coldzera, one of the most driven top pros I've ever seen. As in, he could be the best player in the world, and he's still working to be the best he can be. He doesn't go, cool, I'm the best, right? Well, since I'm the best, even if I fuck around and come in late tomorrow, I'll probably still be like second or third best. So you know what, bartender, that'll be a double, thanks. No. This is a guy where you hear stories about him just practicing all day long, practicing in his fucking off season when he goes home, playing with friends in pugs who are like low-level friends who aren't very good at CS, and he's playing every spot as though it was an actual professional match, and he's trying to cover this one and com correctly because he wants to be the best player he can ever be. When your stars are like that, and when you've got leadership figures, everyone falls in line, because if they don't, first of all, there will be conflict points, and those people who don't conform to the team will be kicked the fuck out. Secondly, because they see the star player who's better than them does everything right. They see that the influencers of the team, the leaders, tell them this is how we're going to do things. And that whips them up and they get into that. That becomes the culture of the team. The culture of this team in Immortals is fucking garbage. It's a bunch of really good players. And in fact, I think the whole lineup, top to bottom, I like this lineup. I think it's good. I think they can all do, to some degree, their roles. But the attitude, the work ethic is fucking garbage. They could have been much better than this. They could have been in past majors. They could have won some of these tournaments they've been. They could have won that fucking major once they reached the final and played Gambit. This team, it doesn't have a good mentality. They think it's cool just to have talent. They think talent is an excuse for doing anything you want to do. You have to realize the fuck up professionally is there. That's the situation with Immortals and Dreamhack. But then there's another whole fuck up that need never have existed, which was the Twitter war from some of the Immortals players, and most particularly kNg. Because kNg on Twitter was out of motherfucking control. And I realize already people are going to admit, like, what do you mean? How can you say anyone's out of control? You go mad with Twitter. I'm not a professional player, mate. I'm not someone who is saying I'm going to kill people if they talk shit to me. I joke with people. I talk shit with people. I say things I really think and believe in. I don't just go around saying ridiculous shit like this. Also, the same things are not expected of me as a pro player. I'm not representing Immortals organization. I'm not representing people of Brazil, etc. By the way, I technically have made this point many times. I don't think you should be role models of your players. I don't care if kNg does or doesn't represent Brazil. But the Immortals team cares if he represents his fan base and his team. So it's a very different scenario. See, I am not to be compared with the players because I don't live in their world quite purposely. Now, kNg got completely out of control, and it largely centered around a joke from FNS, not FNX, obviously. The joke from FNX is, hey guys, should I get the drinks in? Because, I mean, I'm not in your team, but just do whatever I say, right? The joke from FNS, the CLG in-game leader, were obviously CLG lost to Immortals in the semi-final. So when all this stuff came out and the rumors were, they're up late drinking, FNS made a joke. He said, like, I sort of lost the match to 3 hungover players. And they did like an emoji, like laughing or crying. The joke there, by the way, because kNg doesn't understand the joke, by the way. The joke there is not like, you piece of shit, you were hungover. No, the joke is, he's actually been self-deprecating. He's sort of saying, like, I'm actually so fucking bad and my team is so bad. We even lost to 3 hungover players. Like, how are we ever going to win? He's actually being quite sort of amiable, quite friendly in a way. He's actually kind of bigging you up, like you could have wrecked him even better if you'd have been sober or whatever. And he's not actually saying you were definitely hungover. They don't know. It's a joke. And it literally is a joke. If you don't understand that, stop trying to pretend like you understand the fucking English language, mate. Now, what was FNS's response to this? First of all, he got super angry, tweeted at him. Among those tweets, he said that he will kill him. Now, he didn't joke and say, listen, I'll fuck you up in the game next time. Or listen, hey, don't talk shit to me because, I get really angry if you do that. You won't like it. He didn't even make it like sort of an innuendo. He just said he will kill him. And then when people were like, well, are you going to apologize for this? Like, you don't really mean that. He said he won't, no matter what retaliation consequences there are, he won't apologize. Now, that is fucking absolutely out of order. That's absolutely unreal. Now, first of all, we'll get into the rest of it later. This could all have been solved, this shithole, this whole clusterfuck could have been resolved with one good press release from Immortals the org, with a couple of quotes from the players, and then silence. Instead, they went on Twitter and made it much, 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 much worse. This has now gotten worse than missing the final room the whole tournament, which is the main issue, but it's definitely not acceptable to be saying you're going to kill people. Now, it's also gotten so ridiculous that I am now going to have to explain later in this video why I think it's actually not as bad as it seems, despite how counterintuitive that might sound, and the fact that Brazilian fans, the vocal ones on my Twitter, are so shitty to me all the time and tell me I'm biased against Brazil. I'm going to have to be the one who's reasonable and thinks the scenario through and the cultural differences and explain them to you, even though I don't have any obligation to do that, and I should never have to. First and foremost, violence is unacceptable in esports. Now, I say that with the obvious exception to the rule. You understand the difference between the letter of the law and the spirit of the law, right? The letter of the law does say, yeah, you can't be violent against anyone. But the spirit of the law is, that means that initiating violence, forcing it on people. Obviously, there's an exception in the context of you defend yourself against violence or a clear threat of violence. That's the key point where we all understand that, right? If someone attacks you, if someone says, I'll kill you, and then you see them run at you at an event, yeah, violence against them is not unacceptable in that scenario because it was very heavily implied they will be violent or they are being violent against you. These threats were essentially a promise of violence. These weren't jokes from kNg, by the way. In fact, he's made it clear he doesn't think you do jokes on Twitter in that way. Now, listen to kNg and everyone else who wants to do this sort of thing. Any player in the past, simple, anyone. And by the way, they didn't do it largely on Twitter, but let's just make this point. Talk all the shit you want. I love talking shit. I think it's fun. I think it's even fun to talk shit with people in kind of an aggressive way when you don't like them and they don't like you. Don't ever threaten violence in a serious manner to people who will be in the same place as you in the future. Because if those people then, with no correction from you, assume he is seriously threatening violence against me, first of all, I realize you haven't thought this because FNS is like a little fucking twig who looks about 80 pounds and obviously is a nice guy and doesn't want to beat anyone up. You haven't thought this part through. But guess what? First of all, from making that threat, you might not mean to carry out on it. But if they think that's real, they might just beat your ass. Maybe that guy, hey, he has a brother who's a fucking kickboxer and he doesn't like it when you talk mad shit. And then he sees you and he goes, wait a minute, that guy said he'll kill you. That could happen. First of all, there's a consequence. Secondly, tournaments might make it seriously and might just say, I'm not going to have this guy here threatening players and people I want to be at my event, ban him. Thirdly, you're just a fucking bad person if you do that. And it's not going to be accepted. So here's the main point I want to make, is that threatening violence is unacceptable behavior. And the reason why I say that's the main point is because I don't care about the fact it's rude. I care more about the spirit of what's happening, which is that you are threatening to violently attack someone in an esports setting. So it's not that you're doing it privately or that you know that guy and he lives in the same town as you. You're doing it during the context of an event and you're saying it'll happen at the event if you two meet each other. That is absolutely unacceptable behavior. That, by the way, is thuggish behavior. You're just a thug at that point in time, a brute thug who doesn't use his mind, who doesn't think, what ethically should I do in this situation? Can I think from his position? You don't talk to him privately, like, listen, what's going on here, mate? Oh, what did you really mean by that? You're acting like a thug, like, I could commit violence against you, so stop doing what I don't want. That's the way that, put it this way, I know people think it's a sensitive topic, but that is not the way that civilized, intellectual men think. That is the way that people behave who are acting like thugs, who are uncivilized by the definition of the term. We don't care about you being rude. Don't threaten violence. So here's the thing. People will joke about anything. I will joke about anything. This is a different world to yours where you come from. And you are not going to bring your world into our world. We want you in our world, by the way. You're really sick at the game. Come and join our world. And when you join our world, we have all these rules. By the way, I come from an area where people fist fight, where people fight over stuff. Where if I was at school and I said something to someone, guess what? They came and punched my face in, or I had to punch their face in. One of the two, and it wasn't fun on either end, by the way. I didn't want any of that shit. But when I come into esports, you have never seen me physically attack. So there's people who talk shit to me. I could destroy these fuckers. You'll never see it happen because I realize it's unacceptable. And I realize in the bigger world, the world outside of the little shithole I was born in, you actually have to behave in a certain way. If you want to be a civilized person, you must civilize yourself and accept the rules of being part of civilized society. This is a different world. You are coming into our world. You must follow our rules. We are not coming into yours. We aren't in Brazil right now, mate. And even when ESL goes to Brazil, they are bringing their culture and their tournament to your country. That's not a Brazilian tournament, and we all have to buy into Brazilian culture. Also, this wasn't in Brazil, as I said. If jokes hurt your feelings, first of all, get the fuck off Twitter, you frail... Yeah, exactly. Secondly, how much of a tough guy are you? You can't handle a joke. Sound like the most insecure, soft motherfucker ever born. And I don't care if you could beat me up. Now, here's the part I want to make a point of, okay? This is why I'm going to put this towards the end of the video. I actually want everyone watching this, because you're all watching it in English, presumably most of you aren't from Brazil. The problem is, since this is such an emotionally packed topic, and it's going to be so polarizing and divisive, it's going to make a lot of people not from Brazil think all Brazilians are like this. Or it's going to make them think that everything they said is the same as what it would mean if someone from an English-speaking country like me said it to someone else from an English-speaking country, which would be very extreme. And I actually want to explain to you some of the context as to why that's not the case and why not to react too emotionally yourself and then write off all the Brazilian players, write off all Brazilian and think that they're all just idiots and scum and like that they're just incredibly violent. We should ban them all from events. Don't think that way. And here's why. Because as strange as it might sound, this is a very significant point. A lot of them come from a very hard background, a very different life to the one you or I have lived. They come from places that are poor, places that are underdeveloped. They haven't had the same education. They haven't even read the same books or watched the same movies or listened to the same music. They haven't had the same cultural impact that might have shaped you or tuned you or chiseled off some of the hard edges or made you think and attach an emotional connection to something. Like, that's the way I want to treat people. This is the way I treat my friends. This is the way I treat people who I'm enemies with. They don't have the same rules where they come from. So while that doesn't excuse what they're doing, it is a reason as to why, and it's not a justification, but it helps us understand how they get to that position. It's not like they're all born there and they're all just thugs. No. First of all, they're not all anyway. Some of them, fair play to them, steel boats. These are cool guys, right? They're very chilled out people. They don't react that way. Some of the people in SK. But the other ones, you got to at least understand where they're coming from. Because I want people, hopefully, to understand this, because it's going to be, we've already seen it's going to be fucking hard. Even though they're going to have to make some of the first steps to join our culture, we're also going to have to extend the branch and try and tell them, here's the peace branch. Come into our culture. We know things are tough, but here's how we do things. And hopefully we can all integrate, because we want these talented players to represent countries. So then Brazil has a couple of top teams, right? And they're succeeding at tournaments. The point I want to make, though, is that their life was tough, and it was a different set of rules and a different cultural context, but that's not their life anymore. When they're in NA, it is on them to integrate and learn the culture of NA. This is a culture that is not one where you make huge threats publicly like that and in a very serious tone and then say you'll never apologize. Now, listen, I also want people to consider, you know what? Maybe, in fact, I'll go ahead and say, as long as a few days had passed, it wasn't literally that night they'd met each other after party, I think that he probably wouldn't have followed through on this threat. I think that in the past, when Fur made some comments like that, I also think, as long as it's not in the exact moment they meet, I don't think they would follow through on those threats and fight. In fact, I don't think they'd fight anyway, because most of the people they're arguing with wouldn't want to fight them back, and so it'd be a really weird scene. But even so, even if those tweets really were actually the end of something, not the beginning and the promise of something, they were kind of like saying, oh, I'd kill you, but then you know the person's intimidated, so you're never going to comment again, and you think, right, I've made my point. Even so, it means a lot more to us in North America and Europe when you say you'll kill someone publicly like that in a serious manner than it does where you come from and where they come from. So first of all, understand that they might not mean it extremely, but they have to understand as well, it means a lot more. Like, the assumption where we're from is that you very well may carry out on that threat. You may well do that. So if I was a tournament organizer, by the way, I would actually be thinking, maybe I have to ban these guys. Like, I don't want to invite them along and then have a bunch of fucking like nerdy Danish guys and people from Sweden who are like, weigh like fucking 100 pounds and then worry that they're going to get beaten up by these other guys who aren't even the best team in the world and seem to have bad attitudes. People might react that way. I don't want them to react that way. I want Immortals to be able to come to the tournaments and show us how good they are. This is something I actually learned from that situation involving Fur and involving Dead, manager and player of SK Gaming, during that whole RGM Pro series where they were going to war with the Liquid players over the whole like restart shit. What I learned was, first of all, some of them were using idioms in Brazilian that sound, when you translate them, like they're going to kill you or shoot you. Secondly, some of them just meant that as a strongly worded threat. They didn't want to actually beat someone up in person, I hope. And so from what I've gotten to know about some of the Brazilians, some of the people I've mentioned before, I've become friends with, gotten to understand some of the culture. In their culture, perhaps you just use very evocative language. Perhaps you just speak in a very harsh and blunt manner. And I can get that. Think about the background I come from. That's the way I talk in general. Although I definitely never say I'll kill people like that. But the point is, there are language, there are cultural differences here. But we're not talking just about the language, guys. It's also the way they are doing it. So what those words mean to them, while I agree they should be the ones able to set the definitions, you have to understand that people won't always take it that way, and that they will think, well, they'll be in their cultural programming and think, well, if someone says he's going to kill me, holy shit, I have to call the police, I'm going to get someone, maybe I should like actually contact his organization and tell them like that we'll press charges if they do it. People will react in a very different way. They'll react in their culturally programmed way and based on their life experiences. So the Brazilian players have to understand this. It also doesn't help in general making tweets which are really emotional and really harsh, but only in Portuguese Brazilian. Because first of all, we don't speak Portuguese Brazilian, so we're not going to understand it anyway. Secondly, people are going to use translate. Like on my Twitter thing, it has a translation automatically by Bing, which I'm sure is probably like iffy. Thirdly, even if we translate it, we might not know when it's an idiom. So in this case, saying he was going to kill him was an idiom, by the way. But the one with fur apparently in the past was. We're not going to get that. So again, there's going to be miscommunication. It's not worth doing that. It's going to get mistranslated, isn't it? So I think Brazil needs more leaders. They need more people like Fallen and Zeus, because some of the other players are going to be like this anyway, but they can be the middlemen to help them integrate into what is the wider esports culture and generally the culture that they're in now, not the Brazilian culture. Now, listen, I'd love it if there was leaders in the Brazilian culture that brought them up that way. But listen, it's a different world. Like I said, I don't expect people in a hard world to live in that particular sense. Now, we need people to show these guys, you know what, you might have had a bad life. You might have had some horrible things happen to you, but that's behind you now. You're in a different world with different people who don't want to treat you that way, so you have to treat them in a different way. You can't respond in the way you used to in your old programming. We need to help these guys integrate, and that's why I want leaders to do that. And with all of that said, first of all, these are very extreme examples. Hopefully this doesn't happen very often, and these are rare flare-ups. Secondly, these people have responded in a very extreme way, so maybe these guys are too far beyond being saved. I can't know personally. I don't know them on a personal level. So it might be the case that while I'm talking about rehabilitation in a second, they might be way too far and it might be time to just cut those guys. But you know what? Beyond that, the other Brazilian people, there are people who have a lot of talent. There are top players. But some of these guys have now repeatedly shown, seemingly, that they won't change. And if that's the case, if you won't change, if you don't want to change, then maybe it is time to give up on you. Because I'm all about second chances in general, but the person has to want to take part in the second chance. He has to say, I want a second chance, please. And then you give it to him. Like, I wouldn't ban these guys forever or hold against them forever. I want them to change and integrate and be like the other players. So kNg is a very talented player. He was a future superstar if he kept playing. He's the best player in Immortals, if you ask me. Lucas One has been a big part of defining the supportive element of Immortals. You only see the flashy star players because that's in general what we've seen from the team. Why do you think the best Immortals lineup in terms of placings is one with Lucas One, Steel and Bolts? Because you've got smart, supportive core there. Before that, you just had all these talented aimers. That's something they brought to the team. Henny has basically been Immortals for most of his time. Even when they had Phelps, who was actually the best player, Henny wasn't the best player, but his talent and his style was mirrored by the style and the strengths of the team. They kind of followed what he did. And here's the final point. There are other talents in Brazil. I guarantee you, I know, I've talked to some of the old school players. There are talents out there. That's why the Cold Zeros and the Phelps don't always just work their way up. They just come out of nowhere and suddenly they're there. There are talents. And you know what? I'll be willing to bet some of them are like Luminosity. Some of them have got that hardness, but that translates into a willingness to work hard, to battle, to do whatever it takes to get to the top. Some of these guys will get enough sleep, will turn up on time and compete in the match, and then won't talk shit on Twitter. If these guys in Immortals won't do the right thing, get these other guys. Let someone else waste their money on players who are going to be a corrosive element within our community and won't rehabilitate and don't want a second chance. Don't give them a second chance. Get guys who are willing to, because I know there's talents out there who will represent Brazil well and make Brazil proud, just like the Luminosity and SK Gaming players did.
Machine here, and you're watching Thorin's YouTube channel. 20-minute video for 2 minutes worth of content. Gold.
What up guys, this is Jordan Nelson Gilbert and
Hello guys, this is Gabriel Fallen, player from SK Gaming.
Salut les gars, c'est Shox de G2.
Hey guys, this is Spencer Rico Martin.
We work with some of the world's top pros to teach you how to take your game to the next level with constantly updated training content. When you're done watching and want to train or warm up, just a few clicks will put you in your favorite training mods like Deathmatch. But why warm up for a match on Mirage by getting shot in the back on Dust 2? That's why we built Duels. Real fights on real maps. 1 minute in Duels is like 20 rounds of real CS. The best way to train and warm up. Exclusively available on Boomeo.com.